Welcome to the Science of Parenting podcast, where we connect you with research based information that fits your family. We'll talk about the realities of being a parent and how research can help guide our parenting decisions. I'm Mackenzie DeYoung Skowing, podcast co host and parenting educator.
Hi, everyone. Connie Beecher. I am a literacy researcher and educator at Iowa State University and also a family well-being specialist.
Yes, and we are back for our fifth episode in this season, all around literacy. We've talked about the importance of reading as our infants and toddlers are developing. We've talked about those preschool years and how we can help introduce those concepts at home in preschool years. We talked about last week, we talked about the elementary age, that shift from learning to read to reading to learn. And that really comes into play today, too, as we talk about our preteens and our teenagers. So we've often talked about, obviously, we've talked 3, 4 episodes about how important it is for our littles to read and have reading and literacy in those ages. But often when we get to our preteens and our teenagers, sometimes we drop off and we don't talk about it as often, but we know that it is still crucial for them to read. So why is that, Connie?
So we are, as you mentioned, that third grade milestone. We're hitting another milestone here. That's around middle school, where now our kids are really reading a lot of more difficult material. So they're reading for information. They're reading a lot of content. And that tends to cause them to read less for fun. So we do see reading for leisure reading really dropping off. And that's a concern because reading for fun or reading for pleasure really has a transformative effect on your life in the sense that really enhances your cognitive ability, your vocabulary.
Mhm.
It people who read a lot, tend to have a lot of empathy and they tend to be able to, imagine sort of different scenarios, right? Because you
Sure.
have read all of these different it
Mhm.
really, it fosters a lifelong love for learning, so anything you wanna learn as an adult, you can read and find out about that. So, we do see this kind of, big decline in reading for fun that starts to happen around this age.
Sure. And, it is concerning to see that. And we know that there's several factors at play. I know that preteens and teenagers are so busy and so many of them are very involved, right? I know when I was in middle school and high school, I had about every minute scheduled in my day for activities. And my niece is the same way in middle school. So they're really busy. There can also be a reduction in parental encouragement. Maybe they think, "Oh, they've got this, they can do it, they know to read." But we know that it is crucial for parents to continue to support and encourage that reading throughout their adolescent years. So how can parents counteract this idea that there's maybe that decline and effectively support their teens reading and they're reading beyond just that idea that we're just doing it to get homework finished.
Right. So, the first thing, is if you want honestly, if you want your teen to be a reader, you're gonna have to be a good model. So,
Yeah.
for adults here, I'm not here to make you feel bad about your reading habit. I'm here to warmly invite you to start one if you don't have one,
Mhm.
to enhance yours if yours needs a little help. We really can't ask, teens to do things that we're not willing to do. They're very aware of that. So definitely model that and
Yes.
think about like creating that community of readers in your home, right? Like
Mhm.
this is a family that reads, and do things like maybe a book club together, be involved in the community in a book drive,
Yeah,
being involved in literacy related events in your community. Just really think about how you can make reading like part of your family and not just an occasional kind of thing.
absolutely. And I think as you talk about modeling behavior and creating that community is doing it together, but also think about this episode as maybe an idea for you as an adult to also get ideas for how you can become a, more of a reader if you want to increase that skill. This we kinda talked about that as we were preparing this was, well, this is how to get your teens involved, but it's also a way for tools for you. So, um that goes into the next idea is to be responsive to individual tastes. Um, I'm sure even as adult, you don't want to be forced to read something you're not interested in. And we want to think about that for our preteens and teens too, right? Don't force specific books or genres on them. Encourage them to choose what they find interesting. And it is about finding that joy in reading and not just fulfilling an obligation. There might be books that we have to read, but finding books
Mhm.
that we want to read. But, you might find books that you think are good books, and your teen might not agree either. Allowing your child to choose the books that they will actually read. And Connie, I know we talked about that everything counts, right? It's not just about
Yes.
long chapter books, but things like magazines, graphic novels, those sorts of things too, right?
Right, right. So, and your point about things that you want to read, let your teens maybe pick something and you read something that they suggest.
Oh, yeah.
So, oh, that feels different, doesn't it? So,
Yeah.
that's a really and all of these different kinds of things. So, my teens, for example, read like Japanese kind of books that are called manga. They're graphic novels, right?
Sure.
So they really liked that. I had no idea what that was. So, but, we had conversations about it as like, okay, I will try this, right? I'm gonna give that a try. Um, and again, it doesn't have to be like, okay, we're gonna sit down and read a serious novel and then write a paper about it. We like they get enough of that at school.
Mhm.
So, things that are gonna be fun. And of course, the a major factor in any kind of motivation, like how are people motivated, is choice. Like choice is really just a big part of being motivated.
Right. Absolutely.
So remember also continue to provide access to books. So that could be, again, your library habit, going to the library on a regular basis,
Mhm.
or, setting up accounts so that you can access digital books, or providing, if you like to purchase books, going to the bookstore, there's always used books, right? Or book drives or things like that.
I just thought of also, like, little free libraries are a great resource.
Mhm.
We have a lot of places that people switch books, so just having those books available. The next one is make time for reading. So I kinda mentioned at the beginning that our preteens and our teens are very busy, and that every minute might be scheduled, and we might have to help them to fit that reading in, right? When's a time that maybe we could stop to read? Could we do it, before bedtime? Maybe we talk about limiting screen time, and that means parents and caregivers too,
Right.
that we set aside that time, but establishing a routine that can help, create that regular habit with reading.
You could definitely also think about, and with the prior point too, having books around, right? So, just like with our littles, when we talked about having books around, like having easy access to the books means that when you have a few minutes, you could pick up a book,
Yes.
right? So, it doesn't have to be a necessarily like a super long chunk of time, but a few minutes at the end of the day to wind down. It's a lot better. It's a lot more relaxing to read at the end of the day than it is to be on your phone. So, I think, and again, this is where we have to be a good example.
Yeah, yeah. I know that I have recently started some painting, like paint by numbers, and it's kind of the same idea that it's there, it's sitting there, it's available. Where then maybe I have books by the couch and by my bed that I can just easily pick up. It's way easier to pick it up and read it if it's not downstairs or across the hall or at my office. Absolutely.
Uh huh.
We can also continue to offer recommendations for books or for ideas, for challenges, maybe sharing books that you're reading, suggesting books you think they might enjoy, connecting with the reading, connecting your reading recommendations to their particular interests. I think Connie, I think you mentioned, maybe I'm getting our talk through mixed up, but um, reading what they're reading, right? Did
Right.
challenge
Yes. So,
yourself. Yeah.
y yeah, also, yeah, if they're gonna wanna read more, go ahead and let them suggest something.
Yes.
And this is again another place where you can, use technology, uh, posting what you're reading, or,
Mhm,
some people get a kick out of that. That can be kind of motivating, or keeping track
mhm.
on things like Goodreads, or, any kind of apps like that.
Yeah, so using that, or, like, using, if you're not interested in the technological technolo wow, technology, there we go, that was it, the
Yes.
technology side of things, using bullet journals, maybe if they're artsy, you can tap into that with bullet journals, maybe a challenge. How many books can we read by the end of the year, or by the end of the month? I know my nephew's doing, through school, a book challenge, so they're competing with other kids to see how many
Mhm.
books they can read, but between each other, how many can we read? So definitely making it fun.
Yeah, and I think finding the thing that you enjoy the most. Some
Mm,
people are going to want to read on an e-reader. Some people are going to
yes.
want to read those real books. Again, magazines count. How-to books. Some people really want to learn a new thing, right? And they want to read so that they can learn a new skill. Like even painting, you could get a book, right, to become a better painter. There's all kinds of different kinds of reading you can do. I think it's finding the thing that's gonna make it the easiest for you, right? Like, to build that habit.
Yeah, something about now I'm, like, thinking about all the ways I can look up what sorts of books are on painting and paintbrushes and types of paint and those sorts of things, but, um, do you wanna talk just a little bit more about e-reading? Um
Yeah, so it is one of those things that, um, it's a delicate balance. I do say, e-readers reading on an e-reader is better than a phone, because phones have other kinds of distractions on them. So my youngest daughter would say to me, "Oh, I'm reading on my phone." And I would say, "Okay, but honestly, you're not gonna get as much out of that, because literally there's other things always popping up on your phones that are distracting."
Right, alerts and such.
So, a tablet or an e-reader is probably a better choice.
Mhm.
Just again, if you know that you have a kiddo that's very distractible, they might do better with just a regular book, just the concrete book
Paper book.
might be better.
One thing about e-readers that, I was thinking about recently, I was talking about sleep, and how our brains learn the patterns of light and dark, and our brains can't tell the difference between sunlight and blue light. And e-readers don't have that blue light. So not only is there the benefit of not having all those pop-ups, but our brains are actually not being told like, "Oh, it's time to be awake and be up and be
Mhm.
moving." Our brains aren't getting that message. So it's easier for you to relax while you're reading. And if it's late at night, to start to turn off and start to get in that sleep routine too. So, some benefits of the e-reading, if we're using the e-readers as
Mhm.
well. Um, so there's a lot of things that can be involved in talking to preteens and teens about reading. Um, and we've talked a lot about what we can do. There's a few things that we maybe want to um avoid or look out for. What would those things
Mhm.
be?
So again, that idea of withdrawing encouragement too soon, so make sure that you're still encouraging reading, and sort of don't just assume that they don't need your encouragement anymore. As you all know, adolescents really still need that connection and encouragement from their parents. parents, from their, trusted caregivers, I would say too, not just parents. Um, and that sort of leads into our next point that we've sort of touched on is not making it all about school.
Right. Yeah. Don't force reading. Don't make it only about academics. Make it a little more fun.
I
Um,
do
yeah.
sorry, I should say here too, if your child is a reluctant reader, you might think about like sometimes that's because they're struggling with some reading and it's never too late to get help with that. So if that's the reason, do be checking in with teachers and counselors at school because there are things that help. There's really good, in fact, computer programs that can help increase reading skills. So if that's the reason, there are there's stuff you can do for that.
Yeah. One of the things that we talked about is maybe the step before that is making sure you're not focusing on just the skill of reading. Like, you need to read to learn how to read, you need to learn to, push yourself, that sort of thing, but still finding ways to make it fun for them. But if you do get to that point, I love that piece of advice. Um, I I feel that sometimes also parents might get to the point where they're like, "Oh, they're, middle schoolers, high schoolers. They'll talk to their teachers." But that's also not always the case, right? So to be
Mhm.
asking for some help on their behalf too.
Right.
Uh, do you wanna talk a little bit about the 8th grade cliff?
So that's where, again, we start to see the reading really drops off, so they're just reading for school. And it's such a loss because we can probably all think of a book that we have read where we had such a connection with a character or
Yes.
something happened that was so meaningful to us. And that power of reading a book that changes your life, you don't want that to you don't want your kiddo to give that up. So, again, in that transition period, really just be, encouraging and checking in, and it doesn't have to be again, it doesn't have to be don't make it a battle, like, don't make it a power struggle. Make
Mhm.
it something that you're encouraging and start small. The truth is that
Yeah.
small changes can make big differences in your life.
Yeah, I think we've talked about those bite-sized changes are huge. Um And it's true for not only helping our preteens and our teens, but it's true for us as the adults as well, right? That we don't
Yep.
have to just get up off the couch and run a marathon. We can get up and
Mhm.
walk a block. Same can be true for reading.
Yeah,
Uh,
it's the same.
has huge results, absolutely. Um, all right, so that leads us into our reality section of the day. And we figured since there was tons of tips and ideas throughout the episode that we just wanted to give you some information on the okay, but what ifs. At least that's what I'm going to call it. If you have more questions or you want to dig more deeply into learning about some areas of your preteens and teens that maybe we haven't talked about within this episode, we have quite a few resources within Iowa State Extension and Outreach. Um, we have programs. One of our programs is the Strengthening Families program for parents and youth 10 to 14. Great program. You might have that in your area. If you're looking for other resources, our Science of Parenting website under the teen section has some information on emotional changes, changes in thinking. I have it written on a little sticky note here, so I didn't have to go to the website, but changes in thinking, physical changes, and changing parent child relationships. So you might be interested in reading those. If maybe you're thinking, oh, I'm listening to this, I want to go find something else to listen to within your favorite podcast platform. You can find these podcast episodes. Otherwise, if you want to search and figure out what we do have all available for teens and those preteens, you go to the scienceofparenting.buzzsprout.com. That's kind of our landing page for all of our podcasts. You click on the episode. At the top of the page, there's an episode tab, and they have added a search bar, which for me is amazing. Um, because it was so easy for me to look this up, and it should be so easy for our listeners to look this up. But if into that search bar you just type teens, I got a handful of episodes that popped up for teens, preteens, talking to teens, all sorts of things. I would suggest focusing on season and starting with season 5. We talked just kind of the basics of different ages. Season 5, episode 6 is preteens and 7 is teens. So that was a lot of information kind of all in there. Maybe you'll get that if you're watching, you'll get some of that information up on the screen, but, scienceofparenting.org or, thescienceofparenting.buzzsprout.com for those podcast episodes.
And
Uh
I can't help but think that all those things that you were saying are literacy skills. So, right? Like looking things up, you're gonna read all of these things. Like these are lifelong skills, right? That enhance your life. So
Absolutely. Yes. So hopefully that can be helpful for, our parents, caregivers, and community listening. Speaking of community, it is time to bring our community member, colleague, friend, Haley, to join us. Haley is a parenting educator and well-being specialist, just like we are as well, an educator within Iowa State Extension Outreach. Hi, Haley. Hello.
Oh, hi team.
no.
Oh. Do you have a question for us today, Haley?
Yeah. So earlier you mentioned an app that might be fun for teens to use. And I want to go back to that. And I want to ask you, what are some of your favorite apps that could be helpful for teenagers and maybe also for their parents?
Hmm.
Mhm.
Oh,
So I always start with check Common Sense Media, that website, Common Sense Media. They have ratings of websites, they have ratings of apps, they have ratings of software. So that's always a good place to start. There's so many out there, right? And some can be good, but some can be questionable.
mhm,
And so you definitely want to I just happened to be looking up something and I noticed there was an app that it looked like it was a literacy app, but it was actually kind of a story about war. And so just as an example of
mm,
something to be aware of, you might not know if you just saw, "Oh, this is a literacy app." You might not have been aware that about the content and if
mhm.
you wanted to have that for your kiddo or not. So but then really common ones are from the library. There's an app called Libby. So Libby, you can read, and that you can download to a phone or a tablet. It has videos and it has audiobooks too. Beanstack is another one that some libraries have, and what's fun about that is you can scan the barcode of your books, your physical books, and it's like a tracker, so it tracks not only how many books you've read, but how many minutes,
Huh,
and there's challenges in the app, so kids kind of think that's really fun.
That sounds fun.
Um,
Yeah.
we mentioned Goodreads, so that's one of those where you can have a book club, you can have, um, like a group that's reading together, or you can have your own individual challenges, and I know there's other apps too that kinda do that book challenge, book club kind of thing that you can probably find on Common Sense. Goodreads is just kind of the biggest one
Sure.
that you can probably see, and then I will say too that some people get into like the art, the making part of books, and they take pictures and put them on like Tumblr or Instagram. They're called like book bentos, which is kind of cool. So they take the cover of the book and they just make like a collage of different things,
That's
so there's just all kinds of ways to have books in your life that are really fun and interesting.
That does sound fun. I need to go check out those book bentos. That sounds
I
yeah.
know.
a really cool way to get teenagers engaged as well.
Yeah, they're pretty neat.
I feel like I've seen, like, Instagram pages where they talk about books and review books too, but I am interested in the art side of that. That's fun.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you
Yeah.
for that question, Haley. Kinda gets you thinking about different ways. I definitely will say that, uh, the idea of picking up a book and reading feels intimidating, to me at least.
Mhm.
Um, and thinking about it in a different way of how can we make it fun and challenging and finding things that are interesting, like, Again, it's for us, but it's also how we can engage our preteens and our teens in reading. So I will say, I will admit that you've changed my perspective a little too on, ways to engage in reading. So I'm grateful for all the information that we've shared today. So thank you, Dr. Beecher, for all of the information sharing with us today. Um and we look forward to another episode. Next time, we will kind of shift focus, and find a different way that we'll continue on ways that we help our children thrive through the Wow, words are hard, aren't they? Maybe that's why I need to pick up a book and read some.
Yeah, now well, if you read more, you'll get more words.
Anyway, we are looking at different ways to help our children thrive. That was the word I was looking for through the power of reading.
That's
Um,
right.
yes, thank you, Connie. And thank you to our listeners for joining us today on the Science of Parenting podcast. Remember, I already mentioned it, but that you can find other parenting resources on scienceofparenting.org.
And come along as we tackle the ups and downs, the ins and outs, the research and reality all around the science of parenting.
The Science of Parenting is a research based education program hosted by Mackenzie DeYoung Schelling, produced and edited by Brock Bierman, with contributions from Barbara Dunn Swanson, Dr. Connie Beecher, Haley Walker, and Morgan Noel. Send in questions and comments to parenting@iastate.edu and connect with us on Facebook. This program is brought to you by Iowa State University Extension and Outreach.